Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome, welcome. This is the channel where I paint my face, turn my camera on and talk about some books. I'm in a fun little position where I have a ton of books to read by the end of May because I have not been keeping track of my spring TBR and realized that I have basically the whole TBR to read by the end of May. And I'm trying to think of ways to get myself to get these books accomplished in a really quick space of time. So I thought 7 books in 7 days, a little challenge might be a bit of fun. And I'm immediately regretting it because I think I'm not gonna be able to do it because obviously I'm working in this time. So I can't just dedicate 24 hours of each day to reading. I have to work it around my work. But anyway, we're gonna attempt the 7 books in 7 days challenge and just see how we go. So what is the first book that I'm going to be starting with? It's going to be Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. This is the beautiful Fairy Loot, I think, edition of the story. Yep, Fairy Loot, and I mean, it's just gorgeous. I love that bright yellow cover, and I think it's bright pink underneath as well, which is just, it's fluorescent and amazing, and I'm not usually a fan of fluorescent colors, but this just does it for me. Anyway, oh, and look at those sprayed edges. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting distracted. As for what this book is about, let's read the blurb because I don't really know. And it says, hidden among us is a secret coven of witches. Known as Her Majesty's Royal Coven, they protect crown and country from magical forces and otherworldly evil. But their greatest enemy will come from within. There are whisperings of a prophecy that will bring the coven to its knees, and 4 best friends are about to be caught at the center. Will Helena, Neve, Leonie, and Elle be able to stop the prophecy before it's too late? Or will the differences that have seen them grow apart since childhood be too great to overcome? Life as a modern witch was never simple, but now it's about to get apocalyptic. I think that sounds really, really interesting. I am actually 70 pages into this book so far. I have read a little bit this morning before I start work, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm enjoying reading from the multiple perspectives of the girls, and that you get sort of a chapter at the beginning that sort of forms their relationship, so you know that they were connected at some point in the past before you go into the present timeline when they're all kind of estranged from each other in different ways. So you've got Helena, who sort of made her way up through the ranks and she leads HMRC now. She's like the most powerful witch in the coven. Then you've got Neve, who has left HMRC in order to become a veterinarian, and she is an incredibly powerful witch as well. She's what's called an adept, which means she's able to do multiple types of magic, but she is like the main POV that I'm reading from as well. So I think she's probably like the glue that'll bring this relationship between all the different girls back together. Then you've got Elle, who seems to be married to a guy who's a bit of a jackass. I don't think she's in HMRC anymore, but I'm not 100% sure. It's not super clear. And she's got a child who is beginning to show symptoms of having magical abilities. The only problem is Elle has never told her husband that she's a witch. So now she's been lying to her husband all her life. So now she has to decide whether she's going to get her daughter to also lie to her husband. And then lastly, you've got Leonie, who is a mixed race woman who, after dealing with a lot of racial prejudice within HMRC, she decided to leave and start her own rival coven called Diaspora, I think is what it's called. But so yeah, those are the 4 women and where they're at now at the beginning of the book. And then the sort of complication of the story has just been introduced. So you've got this young child who is potentially the sort of prophesied sullied child, I think. And basically the reason why they think he's the prophesied sullied child is because he was able to call down lightning to essentially torch his school. So he's been imprisoned by HMRC to for them to monitor him and, you know, figure out what's going on and figure out what they want to do with him. And Neve's been sent to go and try and speak with him. And she's managed to sort of form a relationship in such a way that this kid trusts her. And now, because she used to be like the person that would tutor all the young kids when she was in HMRC, she's potentially going to take up that role again and tutor this sullied child, as well as Elle's daughter who's showing magical abilities. And then the sort of background of all of this is that there was a war at some point in the past that like wiped out a ton of their coven. So they're all stressing because they're like still recovering from that war and recovering from the trauma that they experienced during that war. And now they've got this sullied child who's prophesied to destroy everything. There's just a lot of emotional mess going on in the story, and I'm only 70 pages in, but I am thoroughly, thoroughly interested in this story. So I'm going to keep reading. This is probably going to be a spoilery vlog, so tune out now if you don't want to know what happens in all of these books that I'm going to be reading. Fingers crossed I can get 7 books in 7 days, but for now, let's just focus on this one. But I do have to say that I do have other plans other than the 7 books in 7 days challenge, which is that I'm going to an author event tonight for L.R. Lamb, who is being interviewed by Samantha Shannon. It's all in honor of L.R. Lamb's new release, Dragonfall, which I do own but haven't read yet, so I'm gonna get that signed tonight. And I've just finished The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon, so I'm hopefully gonna get that signed tonight as well. So that author event is tonight, and then tomorrow night I've got an author event with Lex Croucher, who's getting interviewed by a booktuber slash book blogger whose name is like Sana Vliegenhart. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but that is an event I'm going to tomorrow night, so I'll include some B-roll of both of those events in a second. And yeah, let's crack straight into these reads and this vlog. Hey, I've done absolutely no additional reading today, so I don't really know why I'm updating you, other than to say I'm off to the library on my lunch break to go and return some books and pick up some new holds. So I'm gonna go do that, maybe get some lunch because I am starving, and damn, I'm looking shiny. So yeah, let's go to the library. Apologies for the horrible lighting. It is 5:30 p.m, so I've just finished work for the day, and as you can probably tell from the fact that I'm wearing my jacket indoors in summer like a loony, it is really cold in my flat. But I'm here with an update, and that is to say I have been picking up on and off Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson throughout the day, so on my lunch break and that sort of thing, and since I finished work, and I am now 190 pages in, so I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at in the story. Apologies for the horrible lighting that's making me look really bald. And I'm enjoying this way more than I expected to. It's really hooking me in. I'm liking being in all the girls' point of views, like having all the different point of views of all the different girls in the friendship group and kind of understanding the relationships between them. I think I was definitely right in the fact that like Neve is like the glue between all of the girls. She's definitely the main POV. We spend the most time with her, and then the other girls are sort of on the side around her. Don't get me wrong, all their lives, like there's various competing issues that all of them are dealing with, but Neve definitely tends to be the focus because she's the one who's agreed to take in this sullied child. And I'm liking how the majority of the story is set in the present time, and it's really including minor moments that happened in the real world, in our world, like the pandemic and Spice Girls and all these sorts of things, and it's using them to really center the story so that you still kind of feel like the characters are relatable because they're talking about things that we're able to, or that I'm able to relate to, having experienced those things in London. But then obviously everything that they're experiencing as witches is very unrelatable because like magic, obviously. Other thing that was mentioned that I really liked is that the American sort of equivalent to HMRC is, the abbreviation is CIA. So it's like the CIA are actually witches. I love, actually, in this book, it references how, you know, HMRC, it has this sort of cloak and dagger thing. It pretends to be a tax company. And the reason why they're able to do that and get away with it is because everybody hates the tax person, so nobody's gonna question it. And I was like, that is so true. I hate the HMRC. Everybody inherently hates the tax company or the tax man. So that makes total sense. The writing's really hooking me in. I'm getting really attached to all the characters. Definitely very much getting attached to Theo, who is the sullied child. He's definitely positioned as a very sympathetic character who's just like a young boy. I think he is actually like a teenager, maybe 16 years old, but the way he's sort of written is very innocent, very naive, very unsure. He's very shy. He's not talking. He communicates basically entirely through telepathy. So it's making him seem really young. And I think that's done on purpose because he's very new to this world. So I really like that, though it does make it a little bit weird in the scenes where it's him and one of the other girls' daughters, Holly, both getting tutored by Neve, and there's hints that like the two of them are attracted to each other because I'm like, no, he's like 10, but he's not 10. He's probably like 15, 16, so it's totally fine for him to have a crush on a girl his age. But anyway, I like how his character's being developed as this sort of young and naive kid, and I'm really hoping that he stays a good guy and this isn't like a villain origin story, but I have a feeling it's probably going to be a villain origin story if he's supposed to be the sullied child. It's either that or Helena, who leads up HMRC, is going to become a sort of villain, or HMRC is going to be positioned as a bit of a villainous organization organization, because you're definitely getting a lot of perspectives from the other witches that are like, this particular organization is very prejudicial, very mean, very much excluding certain types of people that don't fit their sort of brand, I guess. You see a lot of that through Leonie's perspective in particular, because she's obviously started her own Coven Diaspora, which is created basically specifically to contradict everything HMRC goes for. I like that we went back in time as well to explain the situation between Neve and her sister Kiara, because there has been hints dropped throughout the novel that Neve had a sister Kiara who was part of the friendship group, and then something happened and now she was sort of in a hospital / prison situation and she wasn't able to communicate. So finally at about, you know, 40% into the book, we got that scene going back in time to understand what actually happened with Kiara, why she's in this prison hospital situation, what she did wrong, and why she's unable to communicate, which makes the whole situation with Theo, where he's like, I can hear your sister, she's calling out for you, really, really strange, because Kiara's not supposed to remember Neve. She's not supposed to remember anything. So how is Kiara connecting to Theo? And they must be super far away from each other, and there must be all sorts of blocks that's stopping Kiara from contacting anyone on the outside. But how is Theo able to contact her? Yeah, so I'm really enjoying this book. I'm loving the sort of political commentary it makes, where it's like those idiots in power when it relates to like government and everything. They're like, oh, it's just another Eton guy, you know, happy that he's made class president or something like that. And I thought that was a really funny thing, because I definitely feel that. That's very relatable. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the read. I'm gonna jump straight back in and hopefully get this book finished today, because 7 books in 7 days, mate. Like, this is going to be hard, but I am determined, and the fact that I'm enjoying this makes it easier. So jumping back in, and I'll be grabbing dinner in a bit when Ben gets home, but he's working late lately, so that probably won't be for a while. So yeah, I'll talk to you in a bit when I have an update. I had to jump back in quickly because we just had a really, really interesting passage that's all about like the history of HMRC. So not the history of witchcraft, but of HMRC specifically. And I really, really like that a lot of the moments of power or moments of founding or support within the sort of witch community, witch world, were really, really centered around female monarchs. So it links back to like Anne Boleyn being the sort of founder of changing witches' lives in England forever. And then that was followed up by Queen Elizabeth I, who obviously really, really famous female monarch in British history. And then, you know, obviously the throne passes to James, I think the first or the second, when Elizabeth decided she didn't want to have children, and witches were like immediately persecuted because he was really threatened by them. And then, you know, witches went through these years and years and years of persecution, or these like centuries, I think, of persecution. And then Queen Victoria pops up, and all of a sudden witches are sort of back in a comfortable position again. They're brought on as part of the monarchy to support the monarchy. You know, Queen Victoria is said to have had her own sort of cabal, I guess, or coven of witches that would help her rule. And it was at that point that the witches were then sort of formed into an organization where it was decided that witches would always support the throne and the church, not always parliaments, because obviously parliaments would just send them out to war and make them do crazy, stupid, violent shit, but to support the crown. And I really like that, yeah, it's all connected to these like female monarchs, and it really grounds again this idea that the women are where the power is, the women are where everything's based in this story. So yeah, that was a really cool moment. But anyway, back to the read. Okay, another update, because I'm just kind of gobsmacked. I'm really, really hoping that now that Helena is going to be a villain, because there's been a reveal about a transgender character. The way that that's sort of been approached has been interesting, because you've got, obviously, the character that this revolves around has confided in their friend. And their friend, who is obviously their age, 15, 16 years old, you know, doesn't really know how to deal with this information, is kind of struggling with it. So they end up going to tell their mother. And I liked how that was dealt with, because it was a sharing of information in a sort of caring, like, young kid doesn't know how to deal with the information they've been told kind of way. And then that mother went and told her friend, and that was because her friend is the one who cares for this kid. So again, that was a situation where I was like, it's a sharing of information that is important to the care of a specific kid. And you know, it's not great, obviously. These sorts of things are obviously that person's story to tell, but the way that it was handled, I was like, it was all done with this sort of desire to care for this kid. But then that information, someone eavesdrops on the conversation between those two friends, the two mothers, and hears about this transgender character. And the way that person shares the information to Helena is like gossip. Like she's really like, she's telling it in such a way that's like, oh, you wouldn't believe, like, guess what? Oh my God, this person thinks they're a girl. And it's kind of, the way that it's done is really, really rude, really insensitive, really very much like it's gossip rather than being told out of like care for the person or wanting to help the person that's dealing with something that I can only imagine is incredibly, incredibly difficult to come to terms with and figure out and puzzle through in your own mind, especially when you're so young and you're dealing with puberty and all the other crap. I hated how that was shared to Helena. And I hated how after finding out that this person is transgender, Helena still refused to use the correct pronouns. Helena still continued to call this person he, him, and everything. Didn't switch to she, her. And when the person that told Helena was like, maybe we should start using she, her pronouns, like, maybe we should stop calling this person him, Helena's response was, oh, we'll see. And I'm kind of like, no, not we'll see. If this is how this person feels, they're not just doing this for attention or because they just kind of feel like a girl that day. Like, this is a real thing. Like, it's not a we'll see. It's a, have some respect and treat this person the way they deserve to be treated. So I really, really did not like how that was handled. And that's not a criticism of Juno Dawson, that's a criticism of that specific character, because I'm gonna struggle to come back from something that just felt really ignorant. And I'm really not liking how Helena sort of looks down on everyone. She believes herself as better than everyone, as more powerful than everyone. She looks at people who use specific types of magic and she goes, oh, that's peasant magic. Like, changing your appearance is apparently peasant magic. And I just was like, that really, really just messes with everything. Like, no, that's horrible. So yeah, I'm really hoping that Helena turns into the villain, and I guess HMRC turns into the villain, because the prejudice there, I'm just not gonna really be able to come to terms with that as a thing. Like, that's horrific. Anyway, that made me really, really, really mad. I'm gonna keep reading because I am thoroughly hooked now. I really want to know how this whole situation is going to be dealt with, because it's obviously a very sensitive topic. There's obviously very sensitive language that you have to use around this topic, and I really, really want to see it dealt with very, very respectfully, and I want to see the conversations happening between the carer and the person who actually is having those feelings like they're in the wrong body, because I think that's going to be a real defining thing. So yeah, let's jump back in, because wow. And oh my God, one thing I just realized, after Helena found out that this person was transgender, she fully said to the person who relayed the information, oh, I'm going to go call the head of the Cabal, which is the sort of male equivalent of a Coven. So I'm like, after finding out this person sees themselves as a woman or as a girl, she then decides she doesn't want to deal with that person anymore. So she's going to get in contact with the head of like the male Coven and just push this person onto them. I'm like, but this person isn't a male. So why are you sending her to the male Coven? That makes no sense. If anything, she is even more part of like your responsibility. So no, that's, oh my God, that was such like an implicit prejudice, ignorance, horribleness. Oh my God. Okay, no. If I dwell on this, I'm gonna get mad. So let's move on. Helena is a villain in my mind. Even if she isn't one in this book, she's a villain in my mind. Moving on. Hey, jumping in very quickly to say it is day 2 of my 7 books in 7 days, and I am already incredibly behind because I haven't finished Her Majesty's Royal Coven yet, though I'm only like 50 pages from the end, so I'm planning to finish this like first thing this morning, and we'll jump straight into True Crime Story by Joseph Knox, which is my next book. I'm going to save my review for Her Majesty's Royal Coven for later because I'm just about to head off to work, but I just wanted to jump in and give you a quick update. So, see you in a bit for my review. Hey, sorry for the horrible lighting. I feel like I'm under like an interrogation lamp or something. It's like shady from here up and light from here down, which is annoying because like this is where all my breakouts are. But anyway, I've just gotten home from work, so I'm feeling real gross and tired. But I wanted to update the vlog and update you guys to say that, as I said this morning, at the beginning of today, I was nearly finished with this book, and I finished it on the train journey into the office. Before I started work, I quickly smashed out my review for it, which obviously is up on all the sorts of places it goes up, Goodreads and all the rest of it. And I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I had such a good time when I was supposed to be having a good time, and such a bad time when I was supposed to be having a bad time. I mean, I'm not gonna go into my whole rant about the transphobia that is dealt with in this book because I could sit here and rant about that for an hour and nobody needs to hear that. And I'm probably gonna say something that's gonna screw myself over. But what I will say about it is that I liked how it was handled in that it was very, very clear that what was going on was wrong. And what was happening and the point of view of the character that was transphobic was wrong. And I really, really appreciated that. It didn't try to glorify it in any kind of way. It didn't try and like convince you that what she was saying was right. It was just flat out, this is a bad person with bad beliefs. And I really appreciated that. But I will also say, and please don't hate on me for saying this, that I appreciated the backstory that that bad character was given, because it created this really clear path to how she got to who she was. That doesn't excuse her behavior in any kind of way, obviously not, but it made it really, really clear how she went from A to B, how she went from this kid who really loved her friends to this really horrible woman who was so jaded and so prejudiced and had to have everything a certain way and looked down on people that didn't dress as nicely as she did, called specific types of magic like peasant magic. You know, it made that transition really clear by giving that backstory and giving this sort of traumatic background about why she was so anti-men and therefore anti-Theo, because in her mind, she believed Theo was a boy. Theo opens up about being a girl in this story, but because in Helena's mind, Theo was a boy, she naturally hated her and was more inclined to hating her. That's enough of ranting about that portion of the book. Let's talk about the things that I really, really loved, and there were so many. Firstly, I am in love with the Coven in this story. That includes, you know, Elle, Neve, Leonie, Chenara, Theo, Holly, probably more people. The Coven that was created in this story was really, really beautiful, and I love the found family element that came along with that, as well as this sort of repairing of relationships and repairing of the impact of trauma that came along with this book as well. I thought that was really, really well handled. I thought the character of Neve, who was sort of the main POV throughout a lot of this story, was really interesting because it didn't hold back from talking about her struggles and why she was so reluctant to opening herself back up again, but then it went into detail about how she was able to open herself back up again. So it made me really buy into her development through the story and her opening up to Theo and Luke and the rest of, you know, the Coven after, you know, some sort of situation in the past that had torn them all apart. I loved the element of like motherhood as well that was really prevalent in this story, and of like looking out for each other, both for mothers and for your sisters. So obviously we had Elle and Neve who kind of played motherhood roles. Elle because she had a biological daughter who is Holly, and Neve because she kind of took on this motherly role with Theo. I think the atmosphere was so intense from the beginning because you had that first chapter where it really placed this relationship in this little group of girls, because there were young girls in that first chapter, and it made you really, really yearn for that to happen again. But obviously then in the next chapter, or in the sort of intro of the book, you find out that they've split apart, and that made the atmosphere really tense from the get-go because you just want them to be together again. And then this sullied child is introduced very, very quickly, which adds this another layer of tension because you meet Theo, and Theo is positioned as this really naive, quiet, traumatized young child, and you just don't want to believe that Theo is this bad kid because you just look at that poor kid and go, she's had so much happen in her life, and she's not this way because she's inherently evil. She's this way because of everything that's happened to her. It's circumstance, it's nature versus nurture. And I really, really loved how that was examined in the story, but it made the atmosphere really, really tense as well, because you constantly had this thought in the back of your mind of Theo has all this power and she could really screw things up for everyone. She's constantly involved in situations where she's hurting people unintentionally. So how is this going to manifest? What I really liked is the question at the end around the true identity of the Sully child as well, because that's definitely called into question. And I think I know who the Sully child actually is based on the circumstances that happen in this story. I think this was a bit of a villain origin story for the actual Sully child. So I'm hoping that I'm right, but I'm probably not. I also really love the inclusion of the past timelines that really gave context and set the stakes really, really well for the relationship these girls were in and how it had been destroyed over the years, the sort of appearance of Kiara as a character, and how Neve and her sister Kiara had sort of fallen away from each other. And I think it made the ending of the book really, really intense because that past timeline had been delved into, and Neve was so heavily involved in what happened to Kiara and why she was in hospital and slash in prison. I gave this book 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. I am absolutely chomping at the bit to get into the sequel, which doesn't come out until the 6th of June, The Shadow Cabinet, but I'm hoping I can get the Fairy Loot edition of that one as well, because I just think this edition is gorgeous. I think it's just so stunning and so fluorescent, and you just don't get books this color ever. Like, this stands out on my bookshelf. It draws attention and I love it. But yeah, that's Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson, an absolute success of a read. Now, I have like a couple hours left in the day, basically, before I'm obviously gonna fall asleep, to smash out True Crime Story by Joseph Knox. Luckily, this book is very much written in multimedia, what's that called? Mixed media format. So it's like interviews, it's emails. I think it's literally just interviews and emails. So yeah, oh no, there's like newspaper articles and stuff in here as well. But I think that'll make it a fairly quick read. Plus I've got the audiobook, and it's really good so far. I've read 70 pages of this book, and it's so interesting as it sort of has this massive full cast to tell this story with really distinctive voices, really distinctive accents, and really like torn apart relationships. The story is already so convoluted, so complicated, so messy that you just know that it's one of those ones that you just can't put down, and I'm hoping that lasts throughout the story. It's got this really interesting premise of the author is essentially publishing a piece of work that they didn't do. They are publishing a piece of work that another author put together, but the reason why they're publishing it is because that author was sort of became part of this story themselves. Like, the author got in too deep, and some sort of threat that relates to this story killed them, I assume. That's kind of what the author hints to. And I like that Joseph Knox has inserted himself as a character within the story. There's like a publisher's note from Penguin Random House at the very beginning, which I thought was super interesting, that sort of says, you know, we don't agree with what Joseph Knox is doing, and we don't agree with this second edition or something like that. So I love that. But yeah, I don't think I told you what this book is actually about now that I think of it. So anyway, the blurb says, in the early hours of Saturday, 17th of December 2011, Zoe Nolan, a 19-year-old Manchester University student, walked out of a party alone. She was never seen again. 7 years later, writer Evelyn Mitchell finds herself drawn into the mystery and begins piecing together what really happened back then. But where some versions of events make sense, others are troublingly inconsistent. One thing is for sure, Zoe isn't the woman she was pretending to be, and she may be missing, presumed dead, but her story is only just beginning. But it's kind of told from Joseph Knox's point of view. So it's this really interesting complex, and like, it's got images in here of like what Zoe looked like. Like, they've taken a picture of an actual human being, and that's who you're supposed to picture as Zoe Nolan, which I really like. And I think there are some pictures of like the other characters in here as well, maybe later on. But anyway, I am going to stop talking because I need to focus on reading this book. I'm stumbling over my words, and smash this out hopefully tonight so I can continue with my 7 books in 7 days sort of challenge and do better than I've been doing lately, because I have not been doing well. But anyway, time to read. I'll update you probably when I'm finished, because this is going to be a one and done. I'm here back again. It is a new day, but same spot that I'm filming from. I don't know why this has become a new favorite spot, but I guess it is. And I forgot to check in on Friday. So I'm coming here on Saturday, just before I'm about to go wedding dress shopping, which I'm super, super excited for. It'll just be me and my maid of honor this time. So yeah, we're gonna do some wedding dress shopping and then bridesmaid shopping, but you're not here for that. You're here to hear the book update, which is that I have done a ton of reading since I last spoke to you guys. I think last time I spoke to you guys, I had just finished Her Majesty's Royal Coven, and I was a little bit into a true crime story by Knox. I've now finished this, and finished this, all in the space of my last update, which was on Thursday, I think. So yeah, I've done some decent reading over the last couple days. Firstly, let's talk about true crime story. Really enjoyed it, but I think that it wasn't as suspenseful as perhaps it was supposed to be for me. I think my main issue with this book is that the solve, I guess, at the end of the story felt like it came completely out of nowhere. So I think I'm gonna need to reread this book at some point so that I can sort of backtrack and read it from the perspective of someone who knows what's happened and maybe pick up on hints that I didn't pick up on the first time around. I think there were suspects who were definitely more viable as the murderer than the person that actually ended up being the murderer. But all in all, I really liked the mixed media. I really, really liked how all the different interviews were spliced together. I loved how suspenseful it was and how complicated all of the characters was. I love how you could tell it was filmed or the interviews were done over a long period of time. So the perspective of the characters changed from the beginning when they hated specific people to the end when they were a bit more okay with certain groups of people, or they were a bit more understanding after hearing the responses in various other interviews. I thought it was really interesting that Knox included himself as a character because it made him kind of unlikable at times, which I think is a really interesting approach because it made me as the reader confused about how to feel about the author of the book. And he really, really properly inserted himself as well. Like, he had a photo of himself in there and everything. He was actually involved in the case as well as sort of narrating it. There were a few douchebaggery moments where I was like, oh my God, I hate Knox as a character. He's a horrible character. And I had to remind myself, no, he's the author. You can't feel this way about him. He's the actual author. But anyway, interesting read. I think I gave it 3.5 stars, so not bad, but not my favorite. Then I read Violet Made of Thorns by Gina Chen, which I think I ended up giving 2 stars. Ultimately, because this book kind of felt lackluster. It didn't really feel like anything was happening. It didn't feel exciting. It didn't reel me in. I honestly don't even remember what it was really about. I think a lot of elements of it were really predictable. I did like the sort of fairy tale aspect that was woven in and how you could tell it really drew inspiration from things like Rapunzel, Beauty and the Beast, and Cinderella even. There was the classic leaving the slipper behind scene in Cinderella. There was the sort of Beauty and the Beast scene where he turned into a beast, and that was kind of how she realized that she was in love with him scene. And then there was like the Rapunzel scene, I guess, which is just the fact that she lives in this massive ass tower away from everybody else. I thought that was kind of a Rapunzel nod. So I enjoyed the sort of fairy tale aspect of it. All in all, the story was kind of predictable. I didn't get connected to the characters because the main character just felt really, really annoying and blunt and rude, and the things that she would do, I would be like, you're just irritating me, and I can't sympathize with everything you're going through when you just irritate me. I didn't understand the logic of the hero falling in love with her at all because she tried to ruin his life basically throughout the entirety of the novel and even tried to kill him at the end. And for some reason that spurns a romance. Like, she full on stabbed him, and for some reason he forgave that in like a matter of minutes. But anyway, didn't love this book, so this one only got 2 stars for me. I saved 1 star for books that like personally offend me, so this is just nah, probably gonna forget about it in about 5 minutes, which to be honest I already have. And then just now I finished Anything Could Happen by Lucy Diamond. This was definitely a more interesting read than the second book, Violet Made of Thorns, but it wasn't as interesting as the first book, True Crime Story. This one kind of follows a young girl who, or she's I think 18, who finds out that the man that she's always believed that was her father, who abandoned her when she was a child, isn't actually her dad, and she confronts her mum about this, and so they go on a road trip to essentially reconnect with the actual father and sort of figure out this new family dynamic between all of them. It's definitely a contemporary, it's definitely really interesting in the way it delves into just rebuilding the relationship between the mother and the daughter, because there's a lot of lack of trust there, and then building this relationship with, you know, a father and this 18-year-old girl, as well as the rebuilding of this romance, I guess, between the mother and the father, because they, you know, they have this one night of passion that neither of them is ever able to forget, and they always hold everyone else to this standard. But then they've lived completely separate lives in the 18 years that this daughter has grown up, so they have to try and reconcile their lives and try and figure out how they're all going to fit into this new family dynamic. Like, the father's now married, the mother is very jaded, very anti-men because she believes she was betrayed by this guy. And so it's all this sort of found family kind of situation with a romance tied in there as well. I didn't love the romance because it didn't feel as well developed. It kind of came out of nowhere towards the end, to the point where you got to the end of the story going, are they actually going to get together? Like, I don't know. The will they or won't they did get quite frustrating at times, but I really, really loved that sort of focus on the father-daughter bond and reconnecting with someone, you know, that is your father, but who you don't know. So yeah, it was interesting, but I gave it 3 stars because it was kind of, you know, meh. Like, I didn't come out of it thinking it was absolutely amazing. I didn't come out of it with goosebumps. I didn't come out of it feeling the tension or anything of this family situation. I just kind of enjoyed watching this family sort themselves out. Although I will say that the father, his wife, hated her because she got really, really, really mad at the father character, Ben, for essentially sleeping with Lara 18 years prior when they were on a break. It's like classic Friends situation. We were on a break sort of thing. And so fair enough, you know, she's allowed to get mad at him for that. But then she went and did the same thing, except they were actually together. So when she finds out this horrible information, she goes and cheats on him, and they're still together at this time. And then she like cheats on him multiple times, and then has this sort of belief when she's talking to her friends that he's still the one that needs to apologize to her, and he's still the one that needs to make up for everything. I'm like, you've been cheating on him for like months now, and he's the one who needs to apologize? And then the destruction of essentially her little fling, I looked at that and I was like, hun, you deserved every second of that. Like, I'm sorry, it's not great. It's a shit situation because the person that, you know, was most impacted by that situation is someone that was just a really adorable character. But like, hun, you deserved it. You know, you were pretty shit and pretty entitled, and I didn't like her. So anyway, I gave this book 3 stars. So these are the 3 books that I've read most recently. So I started the 7 books in 7 days things on the 17th of May, and today is the 20th of May. So we are on 17, 18, 19, 20, day 4, and I've read 4 books. So that's good. We're on track, even though the first couple days were a bit touch and go for a minute there. So now I have to figure out what I'm going to be reading next. And I'm basically in this spot right now where there were a ton of books that were on my spring TBR that I then forgot about immediately after filming that video. And as you might know, I do my On the Hook to Read the Book series where I essentially go through all the TBRs that I make and I hold myself accountable to whether or not I actually read the books on my TBR. And I got to like the beginning of May and realized I hadn't read any of the books in my spring TBR and I needed to fix that. So what I've been doing this month is trying to fix that and read a shit ton of pages more than I would usually. Like, I was figuring it out that I would need to read an average of 350 pages a day in order to read all the books. That's not gonna happen, let's be honest, but I've made a decent dent in the list. So I need to go back to that list and figure out what else I have to read that was on my spring TBR that needs to be done before, you know, I move on to anything else. And I have very little time to do it because I have to go to my wedding dress wedding dress appointment to find a wedding dress essentially. And I have to leave in like the next 5 minutes. So, and I haven't put my shoes on, I haven't put my perfume on, I've got my jewelry on, I've got my makeup, got my clothes, but I'm need to finish getting ready. So we're gonna rushedly pick the next book. I will be back with you in like 2 seconds with whatever it's gonna be. Okay, that took a lot less time than I thought it would. So the book that's next on this list is one that I've had for, I think about a year now. I got it at Yelk last year when I went and spent way more money than I should have on books, but you know, when in Rome sort of situation, I guess. And that is A Curse So Dark and Lonely. It's the beginning of the Curse So Dark and Lonely series. I don't know if does it have a different name? I think it's like Cursebreakers trilogy maybe? Anyway, it's the beginning of that trilogy, and when I picked it up at Yelk, it was right after the author had gone around and signed all the books of hers that were on the table. So I have this whole trilogy all signed by the author, which I think is so cool. But yeah, this is the next book that I'm going to be reading. As for what it's about, it says, Prince Ren, the heir to Emberfall, is cursed. Forced to repeat the autumn of his 18th year over and over, he can only be freed if a girl truly falls for him, and after so many failures, his kingdom and its people are barely holding on. I almost said he can only breed. No, he can only be freed. Anyway, Harper's life has never been easy, but she's learned to be tough enough to survive the streets of Washington, D.C. When she is sucked into Ren's world, nothing is as it seems. Powerful forces are standing against Emberfall, and it will take more than a broken curse to save it from utter ruin. So it's going to be a bit of a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which I guess, considering I just finished Violet Made of Thorns, was sticking with like a fairy tale-esque train, I guess. But yeah, this is what I'm gonna be reading next. I want to make a decent dent in it today because obviously I will be back at work for I think the last 2 days of this challenge, and I'm no way going to get a book a day read on those 2 days. So I want to be ahead before that. So I'm gonna read book 5 as much as I can on day 4 so that I can go into day 6 and 7 a bit easier. Anyway, you don't need to know the logistics. That's the plan. I'm gonna go to my wedding dress appointment. I would include B-roll, but I can't because Ben watches these videos and he's not allowed to see my dress. So maybe I'll include a bit of B-roll just walking into the shop and then be like, lol, sorry, gotta go, bye. Anyway, I'm gonna go do that. Need to finish getting ready. I will talk to you in a bit once I have read this book or once I have something to say. So see you in a bit. Very quick update to say that it is day 7 and I am officially 2 books behind schedule. So it is time to whip out the big guns. It is time to get the quick, easy books that I can finish 2 in a day, even working 9 to 5 in the middle. It's time to whip out the graphic novels. So I'm going to be reading the first 2 books in the Fence series by an author whose name I can't remember. So that's the next read. I've just finished A Curse So Dark and Lonely yesterday. I gave it 3 stars. I'll give you my full review when I get home from work today. Actually, no, probably not because I'm going to an author event tonight. I'll give you my full review tomorrow. So on day 8, I'll do the wrap up of the 7 books in 7 days challenge and how I went, as well as tell you about the author event that I'm going to tonight for Alice Wynne and her new book In Memoriam. So that's where I'm at the moment. That's the status update. Time to get into the graphic novels on my way to work and hopefully be able to complete this challenge. Hello, we have officially reached the end of my 7 books in 7 days challenge. We're technically on day 8 right now, but the long and short of it is I did actually accomplish my goal, I guess, that I set for myself of 7 books in 7 days. Although I did feel like I was cheating a little bit towards the end because I did read 2 very, very short graphic novels on the final day because I was massively behind schedule. But we're going to ignore that. Let's talk about the books that I read over the last 7 days and give my final review for the last 3 books that I read as well. So I started the week with Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson, which I gave 5 stars. I've talked through why I love this book. It was amazing and I cannot wait for the sequel coming out in like a week or 2's time. Then I jumped into True Crime Story by Joseph Knox, which I gave 3.5 stars. Again, I've talked about my thoughts on it, but essentially the mystery didn't really leave the threads that I wanted it to leave when the final reveal was made. So the reveal didn't make as much sense as it probably could have, but I am still keen to reread this and see if maybe my approach to the ending and the reveal will change now that I know what's happening, if I can find the threads throughout the book. So TBC on this one. Then I read Violet Made of Thorns, which I gave 2 stars. It essentially had a lot of the cool fairy tale vibes that I really, really like, but it didn't really feel like anything was happening in the story in terms of character development. I didn't fall in love with the characters. The whole book experience just kind of felt blah, so 2 stars. Then I read Anything Could Happen by Lucy Diamond, which I gave 3 stars. I think I loved the characters, but ultimately got a little bit frustrated by the plot and the whole will they won't they thing, so this one got 3. Then I picked up A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. Now, as for my thoughts on this book, I liked it a lot more than I expected to, but it still wasn't really a standout for me. Whilst I really liked the characters, I think they were kind of one-dimensional, so I didn't really feel invested in them in the story. And I think the relationship between the 2 main characters, Prince Ren and Harper, moved from enemies to this sort of dealing with each other's existence to friends and then eventually to lovers really, really quickly. And Harper really came to terms with the whole idea of being in another world, and she really adapted to that really, really easily as well. And I would have liked to see a bit more struggle, a bit more angst between the 2 of them. I did really, really like the guard character, whose name is Gray. I thought he was a great morally standout, but also really gloomy character. I really, really liked him. I definitely got the Beauty and the Beast vibes from this story, and oh my god, when we were in the beasts or the monsters perspective specifically at the end of the book, I mean, if you haven't read the audiobook specifically for those sections, you are missing out, because I lost my shit laughing every single time the monster's POV came on, because it would just be like this heavy breathing and like groaning in my ear, being like, Harper. It was just, oh, it was so weird. As for the plot, I think because of the Beauty and the Beast retelling style of this story, it was very predictable in how it was all gonna play out, but I am interested in the rest of the series, because then it will sort of go beyond that Beauty and the Beast story, at least what we're traditionally sort of know of in fairy tale. So I'm intrigued to see how that's gonna play out through the rest of the series. So I am keen to continue, but this wasn't a book that I absolutely fell in love with by any means. And then my last 2 or 3 books, because I did read another 3 and got to 8 books in 7 days technically, were Fence Volume 1, 2, and 3, which is the beginning of a graphic novel series by C.S. Pacat. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that last name. I did generally enjoy the first 3 volumes of this story. I think a lot of it was very, very formational. A lot of it was building the characters, building the world. You definitely had the characters fitting into very specific archetypes that you'll see in a lot of those boarding school competitive environments. So you have the underdog, you have the golden boy who like leads the team but is also a bit mischievous, you have like the rival who's a bit of a dick but probably has a heart of gold unless he turns out to be a douche in the end. Like, all the characters fit within these very specific set of archetypes. It was definitely comfortable in that way, but it was also very predictable. And ultimately in those first 3 graphic novels, nothing was really, really happening in terms of the plot other than the underdog sort of realizing that he's not amazing as he thinks he is, having to really take a step back and realize that he can be beaten and that the way he's trained is different to everybody else. He got a massive reality check because he wasn't doing as well as he expected to, which I really appreciated, because honestly, he came in guns blazing, being like, I'm gonna beat you, and it just really annoyed me, if anything. Like, you have this unfound belief that you're better than everybody else, and I don't like it because you've never competed against, you know, the best and everything. So I really just didn't like the ego that was surrounding that character. So honestly, I've read the first 3 volumes. I think I read the 4th one a little bit, but then had to go back to work because my lunch break had finished by that point. And I don't think it's a series that I'm going to continue with, other than maybe when I need to do these sorts of videos and need a book to finish things off and get done quickly. So yeah, those are the 8 books that I read in the last 7 days. Man, this challenge was hard, I will not lie. In the first couple of days there, I was really, really stressing because Her Majesty's Royal Coven was taking me a while to read, and True Crime Story as well. I definitely picked up way longer books than I think I should have. I should have really taken a step back and gone, pick the shorter books on my shelves and do those. But I didn't. And I still managed to complete it. So you know what? I'm gonna take it as a win, and we are going to write this down in history as the week that Beth did the 7 books in 7 days challenge. I don't know why that went there, sorry. Anyway, this is the end of my 7 books in 7 days challenge. I would really, really love to see if you guys are interested in doing something similar, and if you are, let me know your progress down below, whether or not you complete the 7 books in the 7 days that you allot yourself and what those books would be. Or just let me know what you're reading at the moment, loving it, hating it, all that kind of thing. Come and chat to me in the comments down below. I love talking to you guys, and I do my best to reply to every single comment. I really, really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do let me know by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell all down below. It's a super, super easy way to help my channel grow, and I will see you lovely people in my next video. Bye!